The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
Amateur Traveler, episode 924. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about rock art and Game of Thrones, palaces and paseo, St. Mary of Guadalupe, and jamón ibérico as we go to Cáceres in Extremadura in Spain. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Cáceres. I'd like to welcome the show travel writer Troy Nahumko, who is recently contributed to the Lonely Planet Experience Spain book and has a book, Stories Left in Stone, Trails and Traces in Cáceres, Spain. And coincidentally, that is what Troy has come to talk about. Troy, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
Let's put that on a map first. Where is Cáceres, Spain, and what is it?
If you imagine Spain and then you put the adjective lost, that's where it is. It's lost Spain. It's if you picture Iberia and you take Madrid as the middle and Lisbon down at the side, and we fall halfway in the middle. Southwestern Spain, 3 hours from Madrid, 3 hours from Lisbon.
Excellent. So you're really close to the Portuguese border here, south of Salamanca, I think.
Yeah, 2 hours south of Salamanca, about an hour, 60 miles to the Portuguese border, and 2 hours south down to Seville. And this triangle, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And why are we talking about Cáceres? Why should someone go there?
First of all, because I wrote a book about it.
No, I think it's the other way around. You wrote a book about it because people should go there. Isn't that the way that works?
Yeah, that's the way it works. Let's back up a bit here. I suppose your listeners might be familiar. It might have made the news over there. This anti-tourism backlash that you might have been seeing here in Spain, in the big cities like Barcelona, Malaga, and places like that. And it's just not the story throughout the country. The story throughout the country is out here, travelers are not only welcome, they are
cherished.
Welcome. They're cherished and welcome. People are definitely interested in you. When you're out here, you're a novelty.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful place. It's a really beautiful place, and it's one of these places that you would use all of those terrible, overused adjectives in travel writing. This is undiscovered. This is the place that your friends have never heard about. This is the jewel. This is all of these things that just nobody knows about. And really it is.
And we've done one episode of Amateur Traveler before on Extremadura, which is the region that we're in, but it was, 10 years ago or so. It is time for us to go back here and talk about what we should do here again. What kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
One you guys did, and that was down in Merida. It's about an hour, well, not even, about 45 minutes south of here. And that was the ancient Roman capital of actually all of Iberia. But Extremadura itself is broken into 2 provinces. You've got Badajoz province in the south and Cáceres province in the north. And that's
Okay.
what we're going to talk about today. Basically, we'll try and follow the narrative thread that runs through my book from west to east, let's say, from the Portuguese border towards south. But we should start with Cáceres. Cáceres is the capital of the province, and it is where people will base out of when they come here.
Okay. Am I flying in? Does it have an airport that's going to connect me to Madrid or Barcelona or Malaga?
So that's a very good question. And that's another perhaps reason why it is the unheard of jewel. No, there's no airport. The closest airports are either Seville, Lisbon, or Madrid. The easiest way to get in here is probably Madrid. And I would say the best way to travel around here is renting a car.
Okay.
If you really want to get deep, if you really want to get under the skin of the place, you need your own transport because public transport out here is rather thin on the ground. You can't get the train out here from Madrid. You can get buses from both Seville and Lisbon, but the only thing is that limits you to Cáceres. Cáceres is a great place. It's worth several days going around. It has this charm that you could really fall in love with and decide not to go anywhere else. It's a UNESCO city. It's the third largest conserved medieval center in Europe after Tallinn up in Estonia, and I think it's Prague or Venice. It's incredible. It's so incredible that they film series and they film movies here. If anybody's a Game of Thrones fan, we are talking about King's Landing here. This is where they filmed King's Landing, and then...
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Now with the new series with the House of the Dragon, it's totally filmed here almost. It's just got that awe. It's got that aura.
Okay. And what are we going to do when we're in Cáceres? Where are we going to go and be in awe?
You center on the UNESCO core. It was awarded the UNESCO status, I think, back in '86. Because within the walled city, there really aren't any buildings built after, let's say, the 16th century. That's why it's great for film. It's great for series because no camera angle is going to show that terrible McDonald's. It's all nice ochre stone and palaces and everything like that. So you'll definitely get a hotel near there and you'll be walking around the old town, discovering the old town, getting lost in that sort of fantasy.
Is there any particular hotel in the old town that you recommend? Or
it depends on your budget, of course. We have a 5-star hotel with a 3-star Michelin restaurant called the Atrio. It's definitely worth going if you're looking to splurge. I went there this summer and the food was just incredible. The tasting menu is just otherworldly. But if you're looking a little bit more budget-wise, just outside of the main square, you've got the Hotel Don Manuel, Hotel Carlos you've got there. You've got an NH just up the street. Those are all good bets to stay at.
Okay. And so we're staying in the old town, and what are we going to go see first?
That's the thing. It's the labyrinth of these winding old towns. And so you're just walking around. There's one thing I guess Cáceres doesn't have, like you would say in Salamanca or in Seville. There's no huge cathedral. There's a big church that's quite nice. And
so there is a cathedral, but it's not the one in Seville, for instance.
Yeah, no, I think Seville's the second biggest in the world, right?
Yes.
And it's not like Salamanca where you have 2 cathedrals, the old one and the new one. Here they call it the co-cathedral.
Okay.
Because the actual cathedral of the, what's that word, bishop?
The seat of the bishop?
Yeah, is about an hour north of here in a lovely town called Coria, which is still in the province. But that's the cathedral. So here you have that. But what you have here are just these palaces. You've got the palaces to walk around.
And should we tour a palace? Can we tour a palace, or are we just walking around the outside?
You definitely can. At the tourist office, you can get a pass. I don't know how much it is, and you can go through the palaces. You can go up on the wall. It's an access pass to all of these places.
Okay.
The hidden gem that, for me, perhaps, is maybe the most beautiful thing here, and funnily enough, some tourists miss it. There is an Arabic cistern here in the museum. So you go to the city museum, which is really interesting because it's got the history from prehistory through the Roman times, through medieval times. But then tucked away in this corner, they came across it, I don't know, 50 years ago or 60 years ago, digging. And suddenly there's this Arabic cistern.
Hmm.
And it's like the second largest in Europe after the one in Istanbul.
Oh,
Definitely
the Basilica Cistern. Wow, interesting.
it's nowhere near that size, but it's really impressive and it's beautiful. The only thing is, in this part of Spain, maybe less than Andalusia, they're less likely to celebrate the Muslim past.
Okay.
Here they focus more on the reconquest, and I don't know, it's a strange thing here. The Romans seem to be welcome invaders, but the Muslims definitely weren't welcome invaders.
Yeah, interesting.
One were good and one were bad for some reason. I don't really get it. But ironically, that is actually why it's in the UNESCO list, is because the intact wall that circles the old town, the base is Roman, but the actual wall that you see is from the Muslim dynasties. And actually, some of the towers, I don't know if you've ever been to Fez or Marrakesh across in Morocco, they were built by the same dynasty. So you look at some of these towers and you think, wow, I'm in Europe and it looks like I'm in Fez.
Interesting. Yeah, I've had the same thing, though. There are places that I was in Morocco that it's like, oh, I'm in Spain. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the same dynasties, right? The same dynasties building on each side of the strait.
Before we leave Cáceres, the other thing that I saw that it's known for that you didn't mention is storks.
The area is, they generally show up around January, and they used to not migrate when they had the open garbage dump. But they've since had to close that. And so they've taken to migrating again. But yes, this entire area, you'll find storks on every pole and every spire here. Anyways, back to what I was saying here.
Back in the car.
Back in the cave. A really interesting point is that to date, and this is to date because this is obviously going to change, but to date, here in Cáceres, they have the world's oldest representation of art. There's a cave full of handprints, full of prehistoric handprints. And they've dated a few of them to more than 60,000 years back.
It's just mind-boggling. I've seen handprints from like 10, 12,000 years ago to 64,000 years ago is... I don't know what to do with that.
And Chris, it's actually also controversial because humans were only supposed to be here about 40,000 years ago. The present theory is that they were done by Neanderthals, which blows everyone's mind, thinking that Neanderthals were this primitive, they weren't capable of art.
Well, you say that, but you and I may have some Neanderthal DNA here, so let's be careful who we're bad-mouthing here.
Anyways, that cave is really difficult to get in. It's very controlled, and there's like a raffle or a lottery that you have to get onto the town hall's website, and they let in 6 people a week. And just before the lockdowns of the COVID lockdowns, 3 or 4 days before.
And this is the cave of Maltravieso.
Maltravieso, exactly. That's the cave there. They have a great interpretation center there. It's small, it's humble. They're looking, now that it's declared or dated for now, the oldest representation of art in the world. They're trying to make a model of the cave that you could visit because the paintings are so delicate.
Recreation.
Yeah, recreation. Like they have up in the north in Altamira, that area. They're trying to do that, but they haven't got that yet. Anyways, so my book basically started there in the dark in this cave. I don't know how many yards into this cave, crawling in the dark and thinking, what are these people doing going so far into the cave to put their handprint? I had the luxury of a headlamp on my helmet.
Right.
These people would have been coming in with these oil lamps, and it was just wild. And what drove them to leave that mark? And that's the idea that starts the book. Through the book, I follow what is called, the Council of Europe has these things called the Rock Art Trail. And it goes across the province. And I really love rock art. I find it really fascinating. It's something that you just think that, like you said, 40,000 years ago, 60,000 years ago, or even 8,000 years ago, what people were thinking and what were they trying to project. And I really love doing that. So that's one way you could organize your trip around the province, if you have a car, of course. So what I would suggest, after Cáceres, there is the second city here. You have a place called Trujillo, which is about 45-minute drive west from here. And it's another UNESCO site. And it's very similar to Cáceres in that the palaces and everything were built from the gold flowing back from the Americas.
Okay.
Because a lot of the conquistadors, I guess we would call them, came from this area. Actually, not a lot, almost all. Hernan Cortés was from here. The guy who conquered Mexico, Pizarro, who conquered Peru, is from here. And all of their booty came back here, and they built palaces, obviously, with gold from America. So Trujillo is another really interesting city, full of palaces, full of things to do. There's a castle, an Arabic castle up on the top of the hill, and it's a great place to explore.
And you mentioned the castle, so the Alcazaba.
Yes, the Alcazaba.
Alcazaba. Oh, sorry, I've got my Latin America Spanish on instead of my. I should know better than that.
But if you're down in Seville, they would say Alcazaba.
Oh, okay. All right. They don't have the Castilian accent.
There's some great restaurants in the main square there. A lovely place to have lunch.
Favorite restaurant in the main square or a favorite dish to order in Trujillo?
Basically, let's talk about the food here in Extremadura in general.
Okay.
So I suppose one of the most famous foods coming out of Spain right now is the jamón ibérico, the
Sure.
Iberian cured ham. And it's all from here.
Okay.
Like the pigs all roam here. They have a landscape here or that are like these meadowlands, these wooded meadowlands. They're called dehesas. And they are made up of holm oak and cork oak trees. When you come in this area, you'll see it. It's very singular. It's this patterned savanna-like landscape. If you would look out, you wouldn't be amiss if you thought you were in Africa. It has that sort of savanna look to it, but rather than acacia trees, here they're oak trees.
Okay.
And the famous Iberian pigs forage for acorns under these trees, and that's what gives them the particular nutty flavor that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, wherever you are, the ham is going to be good. To start off with the ham, but also here you've got some great goat's cheeses. If you like cured goat's cheese or softer goat cheeses, you can't go wrong with any of the goat's cheeses here.
I don't think of cured goat cheese. It makes me wonder what it had that they cured it from, but
cured as in aged.
Aged goat cheese. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, my Spanish might be invading my English.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel. Explore.
Head to Whole Foods Market to jumpstart your January during our New Year boosting event with savings on feel-good favorites store-wide. Save on organic picks, wellness staples, and more all month long.
So the fare here, the food is very pork-based. You would have a lot of focus on pork. They have something called preba de cerdo, which is literally try. And if you're familiar with chorizo, the chorizo that they make here, this red cured meat, when they're making the chorizo, they need to taste if it has enough salt, if it has enough flavorings, etc. But obviously you can't eat the raw meat. So they'll take some of the meat that they're preparing and they'll quickly fry it up. They'll quickly cook it, and then they'll taste it to see it enough to cure. And once again, there we have cure, to hang up and dry.
That's okay. That's the right term for it. I'm just a wise guy, and number one complaint I get from the show is you're too sarcastic. I'm sorry.
Another dish here, really typical dish, would be migas. You find those all over Spain, but here they're a bit more famous because it's a traditional shepherd's dish where they take old bread and they crumble it, and then they fry it with chorizo and garlic and oil, and it's quite good. It's quite filling. It's another nice dish. Maybe they'll serve a fried egg on top of it. That's another good thing to try.
Okay.
All right. Those are the two main areas. There's another city, let's say town, again, about an hour, not quite an hour, 45 minutes north of Cáceres called Plasencia. It's another big center. And it has a less preserved old core, and it's not UNESCO, I don't think. I could be wrong. Maybe people are going to take us to town on that one, but they actually have a cathedral there.
There's got to be at least one town in Spain that's not UNESCO.
So. We'll find it somewhere. They have a really lovely cathedral there in Plasencia that's worth seeing. And that is a good base to go up into some of the smaller villages in the area. There's a valley that runs off of there called the Valle del Jerte, or the Jerte Valley. It is quite famous for cherry blossoms in the spring. So the entire valley just lights up in white. It's really nice to see if you happen to be there in springtime. That's a nice place to see. Around the corner...
Just so you know, it has been submitted as in joint candidacy with Trujillo as the Extremaduran pasture potential UNESCO World Heritage status. So they're working on it.
They're getting on it. They're working on it. Well, good. So I won't be lynched then.
Before you leave Plasencia, the other thing there that I'm seeing that you don't see a lot of in Spain, you do see some elsewhere, is the aqueduct.
Okay, there is, but it's not Roman. There is an aqueduct. It might have Roman beginning, shall we say. There is a Roman aqueduct in Merida where you guys did the
and obviously up in Segovia, the very well-known one.
That one's the jewel of the crown because it's not crumbling.
Right.
If you wanted to do another Michelin restaurant, but you wanted to save a couple of euros, near Plasencia in a place called Zarza de Granadilla, that's with Z or Z, Zarza de Granadilla, there is a Michelin restaurant called Versatile.
Okay.
And it is, perhaps, it might be your most economical Michelin dinner ever. So saying you can get a real fancy, nice meal for less than you would pay in other places.
Okay.
I would recommend going there. After lunch, you could head over to Hervás, Hervas. And what it has is a really lovely Jewish quarter. The architecture is quite distinct and quite nice, and it's nestled in this valley with big mountains up on the side, and it's a lovely place to visit.
And you say in this mountain, so it's a hill town, Hervás.
It's at the bottom of the mountains. The mountains run up behind it. Really, really nice.
Okay.
So starting back in Cáceres, if you're back in Cáceres after going around here, what we could do is travel west and go all the way to the border to a place called Valencia de Alcántara. And that is one of the stops in my book where I find some rock art there. It's a little bit of a climb, but it's definitely worth it. It's right on the border with Portugal. You actually start the hike where the border crossing was. It looks pretty Wild West now, these dilapidated old customs house buildings that are no longer in use. But from there, you do a short but strenuous hike up a cliff face, and you find these cave paintings, and they're really interesting.
And is this well marked that I'm going to be able to find it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There's a trail marker and it shows. And even there's a place where they've installed a little ladder and even some guide ropes. Like I said, it's not for high heels, let's say.
Okay.
And from here, we can be treasonous and we can cross the border and go to a lovely hilltop town in the Portuguese side called Marvão. And Marvão is definitely worth going to visit. White village on the top of a mountain, and you can see for miles and miles around the dehesa, that landscape that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Looks gorgeous.
It really is. It's really nice. And from Valencia de Alcántara, you can explore by heading north, back in Spain, into a lovely area called the Sierra de Gata. And up there, you've got a string of just beautiful little villages. Perhaps the most picturesque is a place called San Martín de Trevejo. And it's a beautiful village that actually has these little rivulets of water running down the middle of the streets. It's a great place to go and stop in the little bars. And there they've got a local wine that it might not be for everybody's taste. It's a fresh, young wine, shall we say.
Okay.
They say that you can't take it out of the Sierra. You can't take it out of the mountains. Once it crosses the mountain pass, it spoils.
Okay.
The wine is called Pitara. And for the adventurous traveler, I definitely recommend at least trying a glass in any of the bars that you would find in the main square in San Martin, for example. Another place, as you're heading along there, in my book, we talk about this beautiful castle town. It's not even a town, it's a hamlet. It's called Trevejo, not San Martin Trevejo. This is just called Trevejo. And it is marvelous. When you get to Trevejo, you'll see that it's just this town that is basically built from centuries of scavenging what was originally an Arabic castle that was later a Templar castle that the French later blew up as they were retreating in the War of Independence here.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole little village is built of this same stone of the castle. And there in the village, it's small. I think 14 people live there. It's that small.
Okay.
But you'll find Danny, who runs El Buen Avío restaurant, and that is definitely worth staying there. Danny makes his own wine, and it's not pitara, and it's a fine wine, and it's definitely worth trying his wine. But Danny also has his own small olive groves, and he has a special olive oil to try, and it is some of the most singular olive oil that you'll try in Spain. It's extremely fresh, extremely fruity, because the olives are different than the olives they have down in Andalusia. The variety is called Manzanilla Cacereña. They're endemic or native to the area, and it's just, they make this great, fruity, almost vibrant green oil. Really worth trying.
Okay.
There in my book, we follow the petroglyph trail because there's some petroglyphs in that area. Those aren't easy to find because they haven't been vetted yet, shall we say, by the professionals. So I'll leave that as a secret. You'll have to ask Danny about that in the bar.
Okay.
And from there, we keep on going west into another area called Las Urdes. And Las Urdes is infamous here in Spain because back in the 30s, even before that, the king at the time, Alfonso the 13th, I think it was sort of famous for going up because it was one of the least developed areas in the country, extremely poor. Because of the landscape, there was very little arable land, and it was extremely poor. And so later, the famous Spanish filmmaker of the time, the surrealist filmmaker Luis Buñuel, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, he made a film called Tierra sin pan, which translates into land without bread. And it was brutal. And they think a lot of the scenes were staged, etc. But it gives an idea of how far Spain has come from back in the 30s. We're talking back in the 30s. This was extremely underdeveloped. And now you go there and it's modern Europe. It's a great testament to the development that's happened here over such a short period of time.
And we're at the very northern point, it looks like, of the province.
Yes, it's these two very narrow valleys that run up. And again, as I said, the arable land, you'll see terracing just because land was really hard and it's really flaky soil.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell the story in the book. We were invited to go up to watch them make aguardiente, which is the local fire water or the local eau de vie, or if you want to call it moonshine. They make it from the must. After you make the wine, all the leftovers of the wine, they put it in the still. And so we went up and we had a great time. We saw two different ways of making the aguardiente there. It's quasi-legal, so maybe we shouldn't tell the local authorities about it. But I wrote about it in my book, so it shouldn't be a problem. And the guys didn't seem to be too worried about me writing about it. All right. Jumping back from Las Urdes, coming down, you come into the town I mentioned before, Coria, which has the cathedral.
The cathedral, the Go Cathedral.
And that's definitely a place to stop and have a look at the cathedral. The cathedral is really nice. It's interesting because you can actually still see damage from the earthquake that rocked Lisbon in the 18th century, I believe. Basically razed Lisbon. They had the huge fires and things like that. And that's why Lisbon is basically all from that period. But at that time, you could still see some cracks from the bell tower. And that's an interesting bit that I write quite a bit about in the book, and how that's affected just not only things around here, but the way Europe looked at divine providence, shall we say. From there, you can go down, and the Iberian Peninsula's longest river, the Tagus River, we say in English. In Spanish, it's called the Tajo. It runs just south of there. And they've opened up the area going towards Portugal, and it's called the Tajo or Tagus International Park.
Okay.
It's shared between Portugal and Spain. And depending on the time of year, you can get these boat rides. You can get these little cruises.
Meaning more likely in the spring and summer when there's water in the river and the water level gets lower, or what time of year?
Basically all year, except for in the summer, depending on the summer, how low the water
Okay.
is. It really doesn't only depend on the weather. The river is also dammed.
Okay.
It's dammed in several places. And the power company here, Iberdrola, who runs it, sometimes they empty the reservoir, let's say, and they produce cheap energy.
Okay.
Because the Spanish law is very strange, where the price of energy is set at whatever's the most expensive method of producing energy at the time. So let's say they're producing energy very expensive, burning gas, and that's very expensive. So at the same time, they'll empty the reservoirs and produce very cheap energy, but you have to pay at the price of gas. Extremely complicated, and you would seemingly illegal, but it happens. So it leaves these communities high and dry. Like all of a sudden, there's no water in the river to be able to run the boats. The boat is called the Balcón del Tajo. If you look that up, and you'll see that it has several different itineraries. I've been on that before, and it's real nice because what you have here out in Extremadura and in this province, for Europe, it's very wide open spaces, and it's a huge area for migratory birds. So anybody who's really into birding comes here, and you can do a lot of birding. And so when you're on the boat, you can see all kinds of vultures. You can see white storks, as you mentioned, but you can also see something which is much more rare, the black stork, because white storks don't seem to mind people. They'll build their nests on all the palaces and all the spires and things like that. Whereas the black stork is a bit shyer. And it's a really good way to see birds floating on the river and do some birding.
Okay.
You can also have lunch in these boat tours. Some of them take you across the border into Portugal. You have lunch over in Portugal, come back. Have a look at their different routes that they have.
Okay.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Hey, Atlanta. Say hello to small business help from Apple. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. From helping you choose the right devices to setting them up hassle-free, we can help you build your business in no time. Speak to a business expert and get the help you need at no cost whatsoever. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
Moving on from there, and basically where my book ends up is what's called Monfragüe National Park. And Monfragüe is, again, on the Tagus River. And it is centered around this spectacular chasm where the Tagus runs through these two pillars. I call them the inland pillars of Hercules. They're really impressive, really nice. In the park, you can do a lot of hikes. It's a huge place for hiking and, again, bird watching. There's eagles and, again, vultures. You're in that area, in that chasm. Every day you'll find 50, 100, 200 vultures circling above you. It's rather impressive.
I'm always a little nervous when vultures are circling above me, but
as long as you're alive, you should be okay, right? I think Mark Twain had some sort of wonderful quote. The vulture has the very look of a professional assassin, and yet a bird which does no murder. So there in Monfragüe, the reason why my book ends there is we're talking about rock art. And in Monfragüe, you have what would be the Sistine Chapel of rock art of the area. What you need to do is you need to organize a tour through the town hall. So you need to contact the town hall in Torrejón el Rubio, and you have to make an appointment, and someone will take you into the cave, which is just below the castle in Monfragüe Park.
And the castle is those two rocks you were talking about.
Yes, in the chasm. And because it's gated off because, I don't know, years ago someone tried to hack away the rocks.
There's always one.
and steal them. But it's really nice. It's a really stunning image. In my book, a local artist named Fatima Guibello, she does the illustrations, and she does a fantastic illustration of the rock art that you see there. I like to say the book is good, but it's worth getting for the illustrations even more.
Okay.
So not necessarily following the thread of the book. As I said, we finished the book in Monfragüe, but if we keep on heading east, we enter this beautiful area called the Ibores Geopark, which is centered around Guadalupe. Guadalupe might sound familiar to many people out there because of the Guadalupe there in Mexico. This one's obviously smaller. It's a small little town, but it's the original. And it is home to a very important monastery. It has the Virgin of Guadalupe figure, which is adored basically across the Americas, right? I think mostly in Mexico, but all across the Americas. But this is the original. And they built a huge monastery around the image. And it was traditionally one of the richest areas of Spain because they were able to produce irrigation around the Middle Ages. The Romans were great, as we know. We've talked about the aqueducts, etc. But once the Roman Empire fell, that knowledge, that information disappeared for the longest time. And then in Guadalupe, we find that they were able to refined this technology, and through irrigation, the valley became extremely wealthy. And anyway, so I was fortunate enough to be invited by a friend of mine. His name's Carlos Blay. He's an art historian, and he works with the regional government. And he was tasked to work or guide this wonderful Peruvian photographer, a guy named Jorge Armastar. Definitely check out his website. He's got some great photography of traditions here in Extremadura. He calls himself a limeño. He's from Lima, but he's been here in Extremadura so long that he's no longer from there, no longer from here. Anyways, he's got some great work. And so he was tasked to take pictures of the area. In the book, I tell the story. I won't give any spoilers here, but we had a bit of a difficult time getting into the monastery. Not that you would. If you pay the fee, the normal visitor, the church is happy to let you into the monastery and the museum. But there was a bit of a power struggle between the regional government and the church. And it took us a little bit of tricks, let's say, to get into the monastery to take the picture. But we ended up taking the pictures, and it was really nice. But anyways, the importance of Guadalupe in basically history, and especially the history of America, is that it was there that the Catholic kings met Colón, and they made the deal, sealed the deal, to give him the money from Extremadura, basically.
Colón, Christopher Columbus.
Columbus, to travel to America, and the rest is all she wrote. Really Interesting place historically, and an absolutely stunning monastery. Nearby, in a place called Berzocana, which you would need, again, a car to get to, they have some rock art that is pretty fantastic also. So that was Finnish rock art trail.
Then you're still in the geopark there, you say. It's
Yeah.
in the middle of a geopark, which you didn't mention much about yet.
It's interesting because you're not going to believe me, but the geopark is actually on the Appalachian Trail.
Which really sounds like you took a wrong turn there.
Say what? You say no, it actually is. So everybody knows the Appalachian Trail runs up through America, and maybe few know that it actually runs up into Canada, up into Newfoundland.
I did not know that.
But if we think back, and we really have to think back, to the supercontinent Pangea when all the continents were together.
I think I'm not quite as old as you think I am. If you think I can think back to Pangea.
Yeah, me neither, thankfully. But the rock formation, or the geological formation, actually runs across the Atlantic into Scotland. Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in Scotland, is part of the trail. The trail cuts down across the Bay of Biscay there and into Spain. And it's very visible in this area, in the geopark. And it's on what's called the International Appalachian Trail. It actually continues and goes down and ends in Mount Toukbal near Marrakesh in Morocco.
Huh.
But that's a tangent of a trail.
But that does imply that there is good hiking in the geopark.
There's plenty of good hiking to be had, and it's you can
But if you
base
get
out
carried away, you'll end up in Georgia. That's the problem.
or in Morocco.
Or in Morocco, too. Yes, that's true.
Basically, to finish off our trip, what we could do, we could circle back down south a little bit. And the last stop before going back to Cáceres, there's a lovely town called Montanches. And it is in a triangle between Cáceres, Trujillo, and then heading down south. And Montanches is this great mountaintop town.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a beautiful castle up there. What it is famous for is the ham. So the pigs forage and graze down in the meadowlands in the dehesa, as we talked about. But in order to cure the meat, it needs a higher altitude and drier, cooler air. So up on this mountain town, they cure the ham, and it's a great place to try the ham. So if you stop in Montanches, you definitely need to stop in a place called La Bodega de Pérez, and it is this great sort of little cave bar. They generally have 2 or 3 or even 4 hams set up, and each ham has a different price, and it gives you a chance to sample the different hams, meaning the pigs that are fed differently, like the pigs that eat nothing but wild acorns. Then you have the pig that for half their life eats feed, and the other half eats acorns. And to taste the difference, and you can actually even see the difference in the color of the meat. It's a real interesting experience to have. And once again, that area has some pretty interesting local wines to try. Again, for the adventurous traveler, it's an acquired taste.
Okay. That was what I was gathering from your choice of adjectives there.
But when you're traveling, drink local.
Sure.
And if you look around in a place like Montanches, the people do seem to live extremely long. They are very long living. So maybe it has something to do with the ham. Maybe it has something to do with the wine. Who knows? Then we basically finish off and we circle back to Cáceres. And from there, either drive back to Lisbon, drive back to Seville, or drive back to Madrid and back home.
What else do we need to know before we book our ticket here and come to Cáceres?
So probably the most important thing is to think of the time of year. The time of year when to come. Spain in general is a really hot place in the summer. And out here, even more. It's very warm in the summer. If you deal with heat, fantastic. Welcome to it. The siesta exists for a reason. Between 2 and 5, being out on the street is not only inadvisable, it can actually be dangerous because it can be really hot. So spring and fall are the best times to come because it's basically t-shirt weather. And the only inconvenience is it might rain, like it is raining today. The rain doesn't necessarily only fall in the plain here in Spain. It's falling today, and it's falling quite hard, actually. But keep that in mind. The winter is also good. It's not a tropical country. A lot of people think it's tropical, but no, Spain in winter can be quite cold. Here, you'll see snow perhaps up on the mountains, but you'll rarely, if ever, see snow down here.
Okay.
So keep that in mind. Another thing I would advise people when they're coming to Spain in general, but especially out here to where tourism is less of a standard, is to do as the Romans do, shall we say, and try to eat on a Spanish schedule, which is difficult, but necessary because the restaurants aren't necessarily open outside of certain times of the day, which means the big meal a day of here in Spain, especially out here in Extremadura, is midday. And midday in Spain means between 2 and 4 o'clock is when people have their main meal of the day. And then they won't eat again until 8 or 9 in the evening. And generally the evening meal is tapas or something light. And I would recommend anybody to try to do as the Romans do, because fighting the system just doesn't work and you end up hungry or hangry.
Okay. Yeah, you were saying it's not tropical. I was looking it up, and it has the same latitude for their listeners here in the U.S. as Philadelphia.
But don't keep that.
Not the same weather, no.
No, not at all. Like, I've been in Philly, and Philly gets a whole lot colder, and it doesn't quite get as hot.
Right. Excellent. As we get to our wrap-up questions, you are standing in the prettiest spot in the whole province. Where are you standing, and what are you looking at?
That's a secret. That's a secret that I'm happy to tell. But if our traveler has a car, the only way to get to this place is with a car. And it happens to be a personal favorite place of mine because it's completely different than anything I've seen in Spain. So once we finish off in Montanches, we come down the hill and we come to a village called Alcuéscar. And just before we get to Alcuéscar, we turn off to the left onto a small little road. There'll be a little sign on your left that will say, left to the Basilica de Santa Lucía del Trampal. You go on this extremely narrow little country road that almost looks like it's amazing that it's even paved. You'll go through groves and groves of olive trees. It's quite bucolic, actually. It's really nice. And then finally, you'll get to this little basilica. And it looks like nothing I've seen in Spain because it is neither influenced by Muslims. It's more like Byzantine. Mm-hmm. And actually, the theory is that the architect was from Syria. So I don't know if you've ever been to Syria. In the north of Syria, north of Aleppo, they've got these what were called the dead cities. And you see these great Byzantine cities or towns that are completely abandoned. And it really reminds me of that. And so you've got this beautiful valley in front of you and this extremely singular basilica that looks nothing like anything in Spain. It's definitely not ornate. It's simple, but for some reason to me, it's my favorite place in Extremadura.
And I'm seeing that it is thought to be somewhere between the 7th and 9th century and is being associated with the Visigoths.
Yeah. But again, I've talked to historians here and they're still disagreeing because up until very recently, it was a stable. Someone was walking in the area and said, I don't think that's an actual stable. Like, I think underneath all of that, there's something quite interesting. And I think we're talking like as recently as the 80s.
Oh my gosh. Interesting. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Extremadura.
Only in Extremadura. So in the summer, there is actually a law, back to what we were talking about, the siesta, where you cannot make noise between 3 o'clock and I think it's 5:30. It's called the bando de silencio, where there's an actual law that you can't play music loud, or if someone's doing construction, they can't do construction work. It's not that they want to be doing construction work when it's 120 degrees outside, but it's an actual law. And it's
Interesting.
still on the books. It's still on the books. So that's something to make you think, yeah, that's quality of life.
And if you had to sum up the region in just 3 words, what 3 words would you pick?
Well, now you really put me on the spot. I'm going to avoid the typical adjectives, as I said, that undiscovered gem or all of that. I'm not going to use any of those. I'm going to use 3.
Okay.
Vast, surprising, and welcoming.
Excellent. Excellent. Our guest again has been Troy Nahumko. And Troy, is it possible that you've written a book?
I have.
I don't know why you didn't bring that up earlier, but
It is possible. It's called Stories Left in Stone, Trails and Traces in Cáceres, Spain, and it's published by the University of Alberta Press. You can find it in bookstores everywhere, and if you can't, Amazon will bring it to your house.
I will put a link to that in the show notes. And then also you mentioned the Lonely Planet Guide, and this is part of a new series from Lonely Planet that I was not aware of.
Yeah, so Lonely Planet has this new experience series. What they're trying to do, I mean, everyone has a phone in their pocket, so they don't really need hotel information anymore. They don't really need restaurant information anymore. But what people really
Which also
need,
changes so fast, the restaurants especially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The turnaround time, and this was very fast for a guidebook, but the turnaround time was still a year and a half from when I wrote the mid-Spain section, which is Extremadura, Castilla-La Mancha, across the middle there.
Yeah.
What they were trying to do, and what they asked me to do, is mention experiences that people could have rather than go here and there's this castle. Well, I talk about Cáceres a little bit in the book, and what I talk about is around 8 o'clock in the afternoon, go for a walk. Go for a walk because the Cacereños still have a promenade or a paseo. You go out in the main pedestrian area in the newer city is called Canavas. You go from Canavas and you walk all the way down to the main square. And it seems like the entire city is out just going for a walk. To North Americans, where are these people going? And the thing is, they're going nowhere. Yep. They're just going for a walk and they're seeing their neighbors, talking to each other. They stop. Basically, what we're doing is looking for experiences like that. You can't find that information on your Google Maps. Hopefully, we can cover a couple of those things in the book.
Excellent. Troy, thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your obvious love for Spain and for the region of Cáceres.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger Delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
This episode of Amateur Traveler is actually coming out on my 64th birthday, which is significant to a programmer like me because that's needing one more bit to represent that number. I won't need another one until I get to 128, which seems a little unlikely. I'd like to do one announcement, which is it was just announced today that I will be inducted in the Podcast Hall of Fame, which still strikes me as hard to believe and pretty darn cool. And I'd like to thank all of you who have been listening to this show over the last 19 plus years, and a special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. If you're interested in learning more about how you can become a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. And a special thanks to John Belyea, who is the latest patron of the show. If that's not what you want to get me for my birthday, then if you like the show, tell somebody. New on the blog, since we have talked, is a post, The Ultimate Guide to Visiting Anchorage, Top Things to Do and See. Check out the blog and see if there might be other information on destinations you are interested in. I'm also looking for California-based writers who want to write for the California version of the blog. It pays very little, but you would be on the masthead and could use that to pitch destinations, for instance, to get potential trips. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.